Hello and welcome to Clock Strikes Midnight. In this episode, we invite you to ride along as we share the story of the Black Carriage of Overton. We're exploring deep in the Missouri river bottoms to see if we can catch a glimpse of this haunted horse and buggy ourselves. Prepare for a journey into the dark. Up and down the Missouri River, tales of ghosts and spirits have lingered for centuries. Spook lights, ghost boats, and headless horrors, but perhaps the scariest yarn of all is the one about a haunted old carriage that rides the river bottoms near Overton. Driven by a dead-faced jockey and carrying the souls of the old couple at the center of this story, this horse-drawn carriage is all in black. It can only be seen coming on dark, foggy river nights by the lantern light of the old wagon. For when you hear the sounds of the wooden wheels creaking and the whips and chains cracking, you'd best be on the lookout for the Black Carriage of Overton. This ghost story takes place around the turn of the 20th century in and around the town of Overton, Missouri. Located in Cooper County, near Boonville, Overton is just across the Missouri River from Rocheport. As the legend goes, a wealthy merchant traveling the river found himself docked in Overton on a cold and rainy evening. On foot and needing a place to stay, the merchant came across a tattered old sign advertising a potential refuge. Taking his chances, the man followed the path that the sign marked and came to an old shack. He knocked on the door, and after a few stern questions, he was welcomed inside the dank old tavern by the old couple who owned and lived at the rickety establishment. Evil intentions were already brewing. The old couple quickly realized by his dress and demeanor that the night traveler was well off, and they knew they could surely make a decent tip if they served the man well. The husband and wife that ran the place were a rough pair. Living poor in the river bottoms, their only income from lonely travelers and the occasional local was barely enough to make ends meet. Certainly not enough to keep their establishment looking nice and clean. The hard-to-find shanty supposedly sat tucked away atop a bluff at the end of an old farm road. At some point in the evening, the merchant evidently displayed a large amount of gold or coins, be it intentional or not. Once the tavern owners caught a glimpse of his riches, the root of all evil began to take hold. After feeding the merchant, they led him to the room he would be sleeping in that night. While he drifted off to sleep, the old couple devised a plan to murder the man and take his money for their own. Some say the man was bashed in the head, others say he had his throat slit. Whatever the case, the old couple murdered the poor man and then tossed his corpse over the bluffs and into the river waters below. In the following weeks and months, the couple took their newly stolen riches to town and began showing off their wealth. They restored their old shack, fixing it up like new. The old couple also bought a fancy black carriage so they could ride in style. Their wealth and greed had gotten the better of them. Shortly after this, the old woman would fall ill, supposedly from an unexplained illness. Doctors at a loss, the old lady found herself on her deathbed, where she made her husband promise to never marry again. Eventually, the old lady passed from the mysterious sickness, leaving the old man left to live alone in his life of sin. But not for long. This rich old man decided promises were meant to be broken, and he took a new, much younger wife, whom he met and married while on a trip to St. Louis. When the old man returned to town with his new bride, the townsfolk were not impressed. Already hating the rich old man for his arrogance and their jealousy, they decided that his betrayal to his deceased wife was the last straw. The townsfolk planned a phony celebration for the man and his young wife, and paraded to his tavern, raising Cain until the old man came out to confront them. As the story goes, when the man emerged from his house to address the mob, all fell silent as down the road approached an old black carriage, much like the one the old couple had purchased when they had just robbed the merchant. Being driven by a faceless man in black, This carriage slowly eased up to the house where it came to a stop. The carriage door slowly opened, and inside sat the man's previously deceased wife. She beckoned for her devious lost love, and without a word, the old man walked from his house to the carriage. He got inside, and the door closed as the horse came back to life, and the carriage took off back down the road. For a brief moment, the stunned crowd stood in silence, horrified by the supernatural scene they had just witnessed. And then, all of a sudden, like time had been unpaused, the crowd completely lost it. Chaos ensued as the terrified mob scattered in all directions, leaving the old man's new bride the only one left. The young woman stood speechless as her fairy tale romance had just been turned into a real-life horror. In the years that followed, the people of Overton and the travelers to the area have reported seeing the same black carriage driving around the river bottoms at night. Those unlucky enough to lay eyes on the horse and buggy usually end up in unfortunate circumstances. Some reports say the black carriage has chased them or followed them ominously through the bottoms at night. Other reports say that the old cart will run fellow travelers off the road, driving maniacally all over the gravel. Some say that they've been following the carriage when they suddenly come onto railroad tracks, nearly getting hit by oncoming trains that seem to appear out of nowhere. And after the initial panic of the near-death situation wears off, the carriage and its glowing lantern lights are nowhere to be seen. The railroad that runs through the Overton bottoms cuts right through the thick wilderness and rides in the shadow of the Overton bluffs. This isn't the only dangerous situation the ghost carriage has led people into. Another spooky report says that a traveler once found himself lost in the Overton bottoms. When he saw the light of another vehicle, he sped up to get behind and hopefully follow them out, or at least get some directions. Never able to fully catch up, the man said that the lights eventually led his car just feet from the waters of the Missouri River. Once he realized he was about to drive into the river, the man quickly stopped, and when he looked out to see where the carriage was, it had disappeared over the dark waters of Big Muddy. In some cultures, rivers and water are said to be barriers for spirits. Perhaps the cursed carriage is trapped in the floodplains that are the Overton bottoms. On the other hand, it is theorized by some that rivers and moving bodies of water are magnets for the paranormal and supernatural. The idea being that the massive amounts of energy generated by the flowing water could be attractive to spirits looking to manifest themselves. On the technical side of things, water currents are known to generate electromagnetic fields, which can cause effects some could interpret as paranormal. This includes hallucinations, strange noises, and disruptions in light and the visual spectrum. A spook light, will-o'-the-wisp, St. Anthony's fire, jack-o'-lantern. These eerie lights appear in the river bottoms and backwoods worldwide, but go mostly unexplained. Maybe there is some truth to this theory about lights and rivers, because just down the river, between Overton and Boonville, there are other mysterious lights being seen on Myrna Road. Some report the lights appear, duplicate, change colors, and some say the lights even develop into an apparition, possibly the ghost of an old woman or a man killed on the nearby railroad tracks. Or maybe it's not the river at all. Maybe this whole region is just a hotbed for unexplained lights. After all, the small settlement of Clark's Fork, which is just a few miles away, has its own legendary spook light tale, and it's miles from the river. The tale of the spook starts in the late 1800s with a hermit who lived in an old shack down in the hollow. One day, his neighbors found the old boy had gone missing, leaving behind his trusty dogs and even his old gun. The disappearance was sudden and mysterious. It was soon after this that a bright white light started ripping through the woods around Clark's Fork. When the light would appear, it would always make a stop by the old hermit's cabin, striking terror in the cabin's new inhabitants and anyone else living in the valley. Those who witnessed the spook say that it emitted strange sounds like two people talking, shouting, and even strange animal noises and calls. The spook would haunt the hollows of Clark's Fork for the first half of the 20th century, before fading into obscurity. But the lights of the haunted Black Carriage in the Overton Bottoms haven't dimmed. Reports still trickle in to this very day. And so, we took a trip to Overton to investigate. And what do you know? We saw the lights in the bottoms. Lots of them. Some up high, some ground level, and some that went right over the river. But the lights we saw came from nearby signal towers, the railroad crossing, and the nearby bridge that crosses over the Missouri River. Could this be the source of the lights that are leading folks into danger? The railroad tracks definitely come out of nowhere, and they mark the transition from the gravel to the blacktop, the gateway in and out of the bottoms. The reflectors lit up in the headlights when we went, but it's easy to understand how the crossing would be difficult to see coming on a foggy river night. Questions remain. Are rivers and moving bodies of water magnets for the paranormal? And while folk tales and legends fade, do they ever really die? The answers are out there. How far are you willing to go to find them?